The gunshot never came, but the silence was louder than any bullet ever fired. Jacob stood there in the doorway, his chest heaving like a wounded animal, staring at his own brother across that dimly lit room. Caleb's hand was still reaching for Emma's, fingers trembling inches away from her pale skin. The lantern flame flickered between them, casting shadows that danced like demons on the wall. Emma's eyes were wide, tears streaming down her face, her body frozen between the two men who had loved her, fought for her, destroyed everything for her. Jacob's voice came out like gravel grinding under a wagon wheel. So this is what trust looks like when you bury it alive. Caleb dropped his hand, his jaw clenched so tight you could hear his teeth grinding. The weight of what had been happening behind closed doors, behind turned backs, behind every lie wrapped in a smile, it all hung in that room like smoke from a dying fire. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and she couldn't look at either of them, couldn't face what she'd let happen, what she'd chosen every time she said nothing. Jacob's hands were shaking, not from fear, from the kind of rage that comes when the two people you die for are the ones holding the knife. He took one step forward, just one, and both Caleb and Emma flinched like he'd drawn iron, but he didn't draw. He just stood there, staring at them both, his voice barely a whisper. I would have given you everything, both of ye. And then he turned and walked out into the cold night air, leaving the door swinging open behind him. The wind howled through that doorway like it was mourning something already dead. Emma collapsed to her knees, sobbing into her hands. Caleb stood frozen, his heart splitting in two, knowing that whatever he'd gained, he'd just lost something far greater. The sound of Jacob's boots fading into the darkness was the only answer any of them would get that night. Now you tell me something, friend. If blood is supposed to be thicker than water, what happens when love turns that blood to ice? If you found out your own brother, the one who rode beside you through dust storms and hunger, through gunfights and grief, had been stealing the one thing you held sacred, what would you do? Would you fight? Would you forgive? Or would you just walk away and let the weight of it crush you both from the inside out? Sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who know exactly where your heart lives. And that's the kind of wound that doesn't heal with time. It just learns how to hide. This is a tale about two brothers, one woman, and the terrible price they all paid when love became something worth destroying each other for. Jacob and Caleb had been inseparable since they were boys running barefoot through the Texas plains. 2 years apart in age, but closer than most twins ever get. Their father died young, killed by fever and bad luck, and their mother worked herself to the bone, clasped tight, that no matter what this world threw at them, they'd never turn on each other. Blood before everything, brotherhood above all. They worked together, built a small ranch together, survived together. Jacob was the older one, steadier, more serious. He carried the weight of responsibility like it was stitched into his skin. Caleb was younger, wild-hearted, always chasing the next thrill, the next laugh, the next adventure. But they balanced each other. Where Jacob was cautious, Caleb was brave. Where Caleb was reckless, Jacob was wise. Together, they were unbreakable. Then, Emma rode into their lives like a summer storm. She came to town with nothing but a worn-out dress and a borrowed horse, looking for work, looking for a fresh start after leaving behind a life she wouldn't talk about. Jacob met her first at the general store, and the moment he saw her, something inside him went still. She had these eyes that looked like they'd seen too much sadness, but still held on to hope. He offered her a job helping around the ranch, cooking, mending, tending the horses. She said yes. Jacob fell for her slowly, carefully, like a man learning to trust something fragile. He didn't rush it, he didn't push. He just let her know in quiet ways that she was safe with him, that she mattered. And over time, Emma started to smile again, started to feel like maybe she could belong somewhere after all. When Jacob finally asked her to marry him under the same stars where he and Caleb had made their vow, she said yes. Caleb stood beside his brother at the wedding, grinning wide, clapping him on the back, telling him he was the luckiest man alive. And Jacob believed it. He believed he'd found everything he ever needed. But Caleb had been watching Emma, too, longer than he should have, closer than a brother-in-law ought to. At first, it was just admiration. She was beautiful, kind, easy to talk to. But admiration turned into longing, and longing turned into something darker. He told himself it was nothing. Told himself he could control it, but the heart doesn't listen to reason when it's already made up its mind. Emma noticed the way Caleb looked at her. She tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself it was harmless, but there were moments when Jacob was out working the land and Caleb would find reasons to be near her. A joke that lingered too long, a touch on her arm that didn't need to happen. And Emma, lonely in ways she didn't fully understand, didn't pull away fast enough. It started with small betrayals, a conversation that went too deep, a moment of laughter that felt too intimate. Then one evening, when Jacob was away in town buying supplies, Caleb and Emma found themselves alone by the fire. Words turned into confessions, confessions turned into tears, and tears turned into a kiss that should never have happened. They both knew it was wrong. They both swore it would never happen again, but guilt is a poor guardian when temptation keeps knocking. The second time was easier than the first. The third time felt almost inevitable. And soon they were tangled in a web of lies so thick neither of them could see the way out. Jacob started noticing things. The way Emma wouldn't look him in the eye anymore. The way Caleb found excuses to leave when Jacob came home. The way the air in the house felt heavy, like something rotten was hiding just beneath the surface. He didn't want to believe it. Couldn't let himself think his own brother, his own wife would do that to him. So he buried his suspicions and worked harder, hoping that love and loyalty would be enough to keep everything together. But truth has a way of clawing itself to the surface no matter how deep you try to bury it. One night, Jacob came home earlier than expected. The barn door was open, lantern light spilling out into the dark. He heard voices inside, soft, urgent. He walked toward that light, his boots silent on the dirt, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. And when he stepped through that doorway, he saw them. Caleb holding Emma's hand, Emma's head resting on Caleb's shoulder, both of them looking at each other like Jacob didn't even exist. That's when the world stopped. That's when everything Jacob believed in shattered like glass under a hammer. And that's when the silence began.
Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat out on the porch, staring at the stars, the same stars he and Caleb used to count as boys, the same stars he'd proposed to Emma under. They all looked different now, cold, distant, like they'd turned their backs on him too. By the time dawn broke, Jacob had made his decision. He packed a single bag, saddled his horse, and rode out before either of them woke up. He didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. He just left. Because some betrayals don't deserve closure. They just deserve distance. Emma woke to an empty bed in a quiet house. When she realized Jacob was gone, the guilt that had been eaten at her finally consumed her whole. She fell apart, sobbing in a way that felt like it would never stop. Caleb tried to comfort her, tried to tell her they could start over, that maybe this was meant to be. But Emma looked at him with eyes full of something worse than anger, disgust. Not just at him, at herself. She packed her own things that same day and left without another word. Caleb stood in that empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of everything they'd destroyed, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly alone. Years passed. Jacob built a new life farther west, working as a ranch hand, keeping to himself, never letting anyone get close enough to hurt him again. Emma disappeared into a small town where no one knew her name or her shame. And Caleb stayed in that house, living with the weight of what he'd done, aging faster than any man should. But one day, Jacob returned. Not for revenge, not for answers, but because he realized something after all those years of running. Hate is a heavy burden to carry, and forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about refusing to let the past destroy what's left of you. He found Caleb older, grayer, broken in ways that had nothing to do with time. They stood face to face in that same doorway where everything had fallen apart, and Jacob spoke first. "I didn't come back to forgive you, Caleb. I came back to let it go, for my own sake, not yours." Caleb's voice cracked. "I destroyed us, Jacob. I destroyed everything." Jacob nodded slowly. "You did. And I can't change that, but I won't let it destroy me anymore." He turned to leave, but Caleb called out one last time. "Do you think we'll ever be brothers again?" Jacob stopped, looked back over his shoulder, and for the first time in years there was no anger in his eyes, just sadness, just truth. "We'll always be brothers, Caleb, but brotherhood ain't the same as trust, and trust is something you only get to break once." He rode off into the setting sun, leaving Caleb standing in the shadow of the life they'd lost. And though they never spoke again, Jacob finally found peace, not because he forgot, but because he chose not to carry it anymore. Love can survive a lot of storms, but it can't survive betrayal dressed up as devotion. And when trust dies, it takes a piece of everyone with it. The only choice left is whether you let that loss define you, or whether you find a way to live in spite of it. That's the thing about love out here on the frontier. It's wild, untamed, and dangerous as any rattlesnake hiding in the grass. It can lift you higher than any mountain or drag you lower than any canyon. And when it's broken, the pieces don't always fit back together. But every story teaches us something if we're brave enough to listen. About loyalty, about forgiveness, about knowing when to hold on and when to finally let go. If this tale stirred something in your heart, then don't ride off just yet.
There are more stories waiting beneath the western sun, tales of love, betrayal, and lessons learned the hard way. Subscribe to Frontier Love Tales, where every story reminds us that love still rides even across the roughest frontier. Hit that bell, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and remember, out here, love is the wildest ride of all.